One of the things that I tell the CEOs that I advise a lot of times, because they tend to be type A and pretty intense and they're the big boss and they have big healthy egos, is before they start leaning into yap to talk too much, I want them to step back and I want them to feel their sit bones, feel their bum on the chair.
Welcome to the Masks Off podcast, Leadership Strategies, No Disguises. I'm Razwana Waheed, and together with my co-host Olivier Larvor, we talk to the smartest people in the world of leadership, change and psychology to give leaders real strategies to bring human back to the workplace.
If you would like to support our show, please subscribe to our channel, like us, or share this episode on your social media.
Author and speaker Mindy Mackenzie joins Masks Off to talk about truth-telling in the workplace. How honest should you be to get along with difficult colleagues? What do type A personalities do when their ego runs the show? And how do you tell someone no without making an enemy for life?
In my experience in the corporate world, both as an employee and now as a trainer, I really find that people find it very difficult to be honest about what they're feeling, whether it's because they don't want to go against the grain or it's not playing the corporate role. So talk to us about your book, The Courage Solution, and how you will encourage or teach people how to have more courage to speak up in the office.
Number one thing to drive courage in talking to other people, guys, is if you actually express that courage towards yourself. So it's a very unpopular notion, but the idea that the only thing that you can reliably change or control at your company or in your life is yourself is a central tenet. So a lot of folks want to start with, well, I need to be more courageous with my boss, or I got to send some tough messages. And I'm always like, well, hang on. Just look in the mirror first. And are you really clear about your motives, what you're trying to accomplish? Is this about you or is this about the other person? And are you doing it for the higher benefit of both parties? Or are you coming from a place of anger or unresolved just garbage that we have as human beings? Which sounds like a whole lot of psychobabble, but actually it's a really good step to kind of stop yourself and get clear on being courageous with yourself.
So let's get really practical then. So let's say we have a leader or a manager of a team and he wants to change the atmosphere of his team. Let's just say that they're arguing or they're dishonest. Or that kind of leader might say, actually, my team are the ones that are dishonest. I'm not. So what do I change in myself first?
The very first question I would have for that leader is, how is it that you have led a group of people in which dishonesty is a behavior that's acceptable? To get to the point where you even want to deal with it. What are you doing in your group environments, in the team dynamics, and in one-on-ones with your people so that you get to a point where you know that people are lying or not sharing information or withholding or all the different forms of deception that we see at work every day? What type of environment have you created? That's the very first question I'd have for that leader before you start dealing with that person. And oh, by the way, how long have you known about this and not done anything about it?
When you ask this question, is the leader still with you, or just walk away to say, well, no, I need a solution now. It's not about me. It's about the others.
If this is very clear coaching one-on-one. You get into a room one-on-one with the person and you say, help me to understand, beautiful question, help me to understand how it makes sense that you did XYZ or said XYZ when I know for a fact that that's not true. And then just shut up, stop talking. And have them explain. I think part of the challenge of human nature, we're so avoidant of feeling any discomfort. Right. And then you layer on, oh, what if this is my favorite person? Or, oh, what if the other person that they lied to I don't really like either and is a political and we get all this gray area at work. And in fact, it's pretty crisp and clear. And you have to ask a couple straightforward questions. Here's my deal. I would go back to, yes, people want really practical solutions, guys, but I'm sorry. If you have a team member who is repeatedly not sharing information or being dishonest or whatever, you're accountable from the standpoint you hired that person, you've let them be on your team, and you've not held them accountable. I do think it actually starts with the leader kind of taking a step back and then take a courage pill and go have the tough conversation. your next question is, well, then, Mindy, if they say, well, I was justified, or, was this, set of circumstances, well, actually, that's not how we do things here. And that may have been okay in the past, and that was my mistake, but it's not okay now. So we need to correct it. So let's talk about what you're going to do differently right now to repair what you've done. I have a very real example of this. When I started at Jim Beam, the bourbon company, it was the first couple of weeks, and there was a history of politics and silos between the HR function and the finance function. I got there, and I had asked for some information from a finance leader, and it turns out they gave me the wrong information, withheld information, in fact, misrepresented information. I went through the roof. My first act was going to be to call the finance person in, but then I was like, nope, I'm going to go talk to the CFO, tell them what they did, give them the facts, and say, I am going to call your person in and tell them that this is unacceptable behavior, period, full stop. I don't care what happened in the past or how the two functions or who you don't like or what. When I ask for information, I expect it to be accurate and fulsome and no game playing. And he and I were absolutely aligned. And I said to Bob, well, I am used to having my best friend at work be the CFO, and our functions get along great. I understand that our functions don't like each other and people don't get along, but that ends with me. New era. And so are you in or are you out? And he goes, I'm all in, Mindy. Like, okay, let's go. And so then I called his finance person in. And it was really awkward and uncomfortable for him. And I just said, hey, mate, I said, never again will you do that. And if you do, you're going to be fired. And I've already talked to your boss, Bob, and he's going to have a conversation with you. Don't do it again. And he's like, yes, ma'am. I mean, that was it. Like it was, and that story got out. So I think sometimes we overcomplicate those conversations too.
You strike me as somebody who's very assertive, but also very emotionally intelligent. So you know the difference between being assertive and being aggressive. And I think some of our listeners may not. So how can they, maybe some scripts or some words, how can they find the fine line between being assertive and maybe being a little bit too aggressive?
This gets back to my principle about checking yourself before you have these courageous conversations about where are you coming from. Are you coming from a place of love and care? And I use that term love very specifically because if you want the highest and best for both parties versus you're trying to grind a point and it's really coming from your own ego, then we become aggressive versus being righteously indignant, that phrase, or assertive about an issue, not attacking a person. There is a fine line. The table thumping, name calling, frustrate, blah, 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 all of those behaviors that you see in people, that's all about them. And it's all about their ego. It is not about everybody's highest and best. And people who are really passionate will sometimes get on me and say, that's not fair because I'm an extrovert and blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I'm an extrovert too. But guess what? That means we have to manage our emotions. One of the best ways to give feedback, I've got a little tool that might be helpful for your listeners, is the LCS model. LCS stands for like, concern, and suggest. And it's a really powerful way to frame up your reaction to an idea that's presented in a group or individual context. Olivier, let's say you tell me, Mindy, I really, really think that I need $50,000 more for my department because I want to go off and do this team building event and you're not supporting me and I know you believe in team building, whatever. I could say, Olivier, I really like the fact that you're passionate about developing your team and want to invest in them because that is a shared value that we both have as leaders here at this company. My concern is that this quarter, we're in a situation where we have to be watching our OPEX. My concern, though, is that we have budgetary constraints this quarter, and from an enterprise-wide view for the business, it wouldn't be the right thing to do to spend that $50,000. So my suggestion is we either phase it later, or we think through a different alternative. Now, you just got told no, but did it feel like that?
No, it was okay actually. Yeah.
So this actually works with your spouses, with your kids, with your teammates, with your boss, with anybody. It's a way to be courageous in presenting a point of view, an alternate point of view when you disagree, especially when you disagree with something that you think is really stupid.
I would like to go back to the ego thing, because to me this is a topic I really like. The ego, especially the ego of leaders. Somehow, I don't know, when you get promoted, and I got this thing myself when I got promoted, sometimes you feel like, oh, look at me now. I'm an important person now. You know, I can make some decision, and I have these abilities to manage all these people. And there's something happened in your mind. You change somehow. To me, the ego, and I know that it's the title of the book, but the ego is the enemy here. And you said coming from a place of love and care versus this ego thing. So how do you access that? How do you access the place of love and care and not the ego? What exercise or what can you do just to notice the difference?
I'm reading The Ego is the Enemy right now. I love it, by Ryan, what's
Holiday.
his last name?
Holiday.
Yeah, Ryan Holiday. I think a lot of it is pacing in a very practical way. When we get outside of ourselves, and getting outside of ourselves can show up behaviorally as anger, frustration, feeling frantic, kind of like out of control, anxiety welling up, our face getting red or palm sweaty. It shows up in all sorts of ways, but fundamentally, that's the time to stop and take a break and actually breathe. One of the things that I tell the CEOs that I advise a lot of times, because they tend to be type A and pretty intense and they're the big boss and they have big healthy egos, is before they start leaning into yap to talk too much, I want them to step back and I want them to feel their sit bones, feel their bum on the chair. Literally feel the chair. And then try to take a breath in, at least one full breath in through their nose and out through their nose or out through their mouth. And that takes like 3 or 4 seconds, but it is a way to reset yourself physiologically so that you have a better chance, Olivier, of asking yourself the question, like, what's going on within? Am I coming from an ego all about me place, or am I coming in from an energy giving place? Or I call it chi giving or chi sucking, like chi is energy. Like, are you sucking the chi out of the room with these people, or are you giving chi? For some folks that are like learning this and they're feeling pretty big and, pretty important and they got promoted, feel your bum in the seat. Like, force yourself before you express yourself, just like knock it off. And anything. And then of course, if you pull that thread a little farther, meditation, mindfulness, breathing exercises, anything that you can do to pull yourself back into the moment where it's not about output or doing, but it's much more about being quiet. You're more likely to be able to access the higher order parts of yourself from which you can lead then from love and care and compassion, even when you have to tell people no or give tough messages or set a direction that people don't agree with. You can be coming from a different place and people sense it. We know.
Yeah.
Oh, when somebody's doing that versus when they're just being crazy and egomaniacal and out of control.
What about then somebody who isn't leading a team but is part of a team and they're having a conflict with their peers? I think that happens quite a bit, whether it's an ego competition, whether it's they're being paid more than me for doing the same job, whatever it is. How can we, as individuals who maybe we have a real personality or values clash with the other person, how can we approach those conversations when our values have been trampled on with the same amount of compassion and the same amount of love?
So I have 2 thoughts for this. The one is a longer term strategy, which is invite them over to your house for dinner. People hate this, and yet it works every time. The people that drive you insane the most at work are the first people you should put on the list to have them come over for pizza and beer, and come over with their family and your family, or whatever that looks like. It forces a degree of getting to know somebody and showing more vulnerability and getting outside the work environment. And people squeal like stuck pigs when I say this. But I'm like, if you want magic to happen at work, then prioritize all the people, your colleagues, your peers in particular. And you can do this with your direct reports and everything, but with your peers in particular, the people that you feel really close with and trust, and then the people that you struggle with and they're static. Prioritize having them over and say, I'm going to have 4 to 6 people over a year and just invite them over to my home. And it's like a squirm fest. Mindy, I don't want to do that. I don't like these people. They don't have the same values. They're competitive assholes. All of this stuff that people say. And I'm just like, yes, and are they going anywhere? No. Are you going anywhere? No. Do you want to change things? Yeah. It's one way to do it. The other very short-term thing is that when you feel like you have been done wrong by a peer, I think the number one thing you have to do before you go vent to anyone else is go talk to them. The old adage of deal your issues with the person that you have the issue, that wisdom about that, go to your brother. There's a reason for that, because guess what? You have a perspective about what occurred. They will have a perspective. You will feel better if you've gone in and challenged the issue and talked to them, no matter how uncomfortable you are. And here's what I tell. Here's the script, right? Here's the script, because people are like, that sounds so easy, and there's no way, and this person's an asshole, and they won't listen to me. You can send them a text or a voicemail or an email and say, hey, I want to grab 15 minutes because I want to sense check something and want to make sure that we're on the same page, right? So you foreshadow to the person that you're on your way, you're coming to them. So that gives them a little time to go, because if they're like the office bully, bullies don't like it when people push back, right? It's so interesting. But so if they're a little bit aggressive, so you've given them a heads up, and then you either schedule or do you do a flyby, you walk in, and I always encourage people to have written down what their core message is that they're trying to get across, because people get conflict, they start to flood, they get in there, they see the person's smirky face, they want to punch them, and then they lose the plot, right? And then they go, I tried, I went out, I just hate that guy, right? Well, okay, so let's try again. So be really clear about what you want to say, but then you got to go in and say, listen, we're both working on this project, and I know we have the same goals around getting XYZ done. I also know that there's some static between us. Now, that's mic drop number one, because you speak the unspeakable, or you make the overt, use whatever phrase you want, but the minute you do that, it's both disarming and it's a signal to the other person that this is not going to be a typical business conversation, and I'm not going to be able to squirm out of the shit that I've created or that's here. Standing here in the office, and they've just said there's static between us. Now, some people will go, oh, what do you mean? That's not true. There's no problems, right? And you say 3 beautiful words. That may be. However, the experience I'm having is that when you did XYZ, I felt ABC. It pissed me off. I felt uncomfortable. I felt disrespected, whatever. And while you might not have meant to make me feel that way, it did. And I can assure you we will have difficulty working together if you choose to behave that way continually. Now, it sounds so easy to say, right? And what I would say to you, whoever's watching this, write down some of this stuff, like rewind and write this stuff down, and practice saying it. I think some of the times the reason we don't effectively manage these conflicts at work is because we don't put the preparation time in. So it's going to be a big conversation. We are avoiding it because it's a scary conversation, but then we don't put the preparation into it. Unlike anything else that's a big deal at work, we would prepare, you put your decks together, you get your data right, you plan. And then for these conversations, you go and you bitch about your colleague to your friend. You talk about it to your spouse, you get all wound up about it, but you don't spend any of that energy in a positive way directing it towards the person that actually created the issue. Yeah, it takes a little planning and it takes courage. And no, you cannot predict the outcome of what the other person says, but I guarantee you, people do not like these conversations. And that person will think twice before being a knucklehead with you the next time, because they're not going to want you back in their office.
Yeah, people hate direct stuff like that completely. So it makes them, well, they've been caught out for a start. Even if they tell you they don't think there's any issues, deep down, they know.
We judge each other by their impact, but how do we judge ourselves? We judge ourselves on our intent. And I remind everybody of that, because most people at work are not trying to be jerks. I just don't believe that. I mean, there's the rare people that are, sociopaths and really annoying. But fundamentally, everybody's kind of doing the best they can with what they've got going on. But where we get crossways is that we think, well, I didn't mean it, and you're being oversensitive and whatever, because we give ourselves a pass, and yet we judge other people really harshly on their impact. I think that's important for us to remember.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Once again, if you would like to support our show, please subscribe to our channel, like us, or share this episode on your social media. Merci.